Welcome to Robotics and Automation News webinars, where you can be part of a global event without leaving your home or office. Attend our live webinars and communicate directly with influential professionals in your industry.
Hello, and welcome to Robotics and Automation News interviews. In this interview, we speak to Suma Reddy, CEO of a startup company called Future Acres, which has made a robot aimed at vineyards. The robot is called Carry, and as the name suggests, it is designed to carry the fruits that the human pickers harvest in the vineyards to the central processing center somewhere on the site. The company is looking to raise several $1 million to bring agricultural robotics to the farming industry and has a variety of ideas, as Suma explains in this interview.
Hi, Abdul. My name is Suma Reddy, and I am the CEO of Future Acres. So Future Acres is an agricultural robotics company. As a tech startup in the robotics space, we're using advanced AI, automation, to create innovative and easy adapt equipment to, as we like to say, carry farms into the future. And our mission ultimately is to help both farms and farm workers streamline the harvesting process.
Right, it's a fantastic looking website and technology, and it's a very fast-growing area, as you can imagine. There's so many areas that we could talk about, but let's start at the beginning. How did you? What were the origins of this business? How did you raise the money? How did you get the technology made? Well, gives a brief history of Future Acres.
Sure. So I'd love to talk about origins in terms of, so the problems that we're trying to solve first, if that's okay. And, so for us, we looked at kind of this really big picture, reality that we're facing. One is that, by 2050, we're going to have to feed about 10 billion people. And the astounding and challenging fact is that we'll need to increase our food production by 70%. And there's a ton of challenges around that. So, we started to dive into, what challenges could we actually tackle? And we looked at US farms and the challenges they're facing. And interestingly, last year, they faced a 12% decline in farm revenue. And a huge part of that is actually production expenses. So 25% of costs are actually going to labor and transporting crops, things like that. And so, this is such a huge problem because labor scarcity is a reality. And the reason labor scarcity is a reality is you have an aging workforce, right? And if you talk to farmers in Ventura, they don't want their kids to do this kind of work because it's really, really brutal. It's prone to injury, really severe injuries. And so that's where we started at a really, really, really high level. And, jumping forward to today, right, as we're, launching this, equity crowd funding campaign on Seed Invest, trying to raise $3 million. It's really about, how can we build products, starting with Carry, which is an autonomous harvest companion for farms and farm workers that could increase operational efficiency and farm worker safety.
Yeah, I hope people will be able to see this video and yourself talking in this video and the technology and just update us about the current situation. It's a great looking website, by the way, and a very professional presentation of everything. I think I vaguely remember from the story we published about you, you're trying to raise $3 million, but I can see on the website it says valuation is $7 million. Talk about money a little bit. What's I don't know much about how these things work. So if you're raising 3 million, are you giving away about half of your shares, or what how does it work, and what can people get out of investing in Future Acres?
Yeah. So in terms of raising 3 million, right, and the 7 million valuation, right, where that is coming from is kind of us looking at, who what is the traction we have already, right? In terms of the prototype we've built, which you see on this video, bolting on sort of the hitch on the first video. And then, who our backers have been. So we're backed by Wavemaker, which is a VC, a venture capital firm with about $400 million assets under management. And we're coming out of this robotics and automation studio called Wavemaker Labs. So just a lot of expertise and capital, which is supporting our growth. But to your point on, seed invest and the $7 million valuation, yes, every person who invests on seed invest through this campaign does become an investor. And it's not quite giving up 50% of the company or sharing 50% of the company, but it is a fair amount that is, shared with our investors. And more information can be found on Seed Invest, fully transparent.
Okay, well, it's actually quite modest figures. I mean, with the startups these days in venture capital these days, you hear of very large numbers often, and they're 3 million, 7 million. Those are actually modest numbers compared to what we've come across. And for such a it's a growth market, so much potential in this area. It's quite modest. And this vehicle, let's talk about the vehicle. It reminds me, although it doesn't look like autonomous mobile robots, we cover a lot of stories about autonomous mobile robots, AMRs as they're referred to in the jargon. And they're used in warehouses mainly to transport, move goods around the warehouse. Often they'll have shelf units perched on the back of them. That is a massive business. You're talking hundreds of millions invested in those kind of businesses, and their valuations are, skyrocketing. So this reminds me of that because it is, moving things around by itself, navigating by itself. Correct me if I'm wrong. It is self-navigating. It is self-driving. Talk about the technology and tell us what the features are of it, and what the benefits to, in an environment like that are.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a great point, right? So when we learn a lot from AMRs, right? And I think, right, as a ground robot in agriculture, we think about, the core features, one being exactly what you said, being smart and autonomous. So thinking about how are we using that CV, that computer vision and machine learning, as we, for example, stop for people and obstacles, and then constantly procure data that allows to make the machine smarter. Two is, and this is really important in outdoor ag, one of my last industries was indoor ag, is that the hardware has to be really robust, right? How we design the system, the chassis, everything, that's part of the system. It has to be safe and reliable. It has to be able to operate in dust, in dirt, in weather of all types, right? And of course, it has to carry that payload of hundreds of pounds of table grapes, right? And in the future, specialty crops. And lastly, as someone who's also worked in renewable energy, right, I really adore the sort of clean aspects of robotics. And so as a battery operated machine, ensuring that it can last for the life of a work cycle, that 7 to 10 hour life, that it can travel for 6 to 10 miles. We're talking about farms that are 100, 200, 300, 400 acres large. So yeah, that autonomy, that safety, reliability, and that clean power, I would say are the key features for this very first product. But the future, right, of course, we think of this as both a figurative and literal platform. You talked about, right, how massive this ag tech industry is. And I think the numbers are around 88 billion by 2025. So what we're really, really, really quite excited about is once we have a ground robot that can travel around the farm, first transporting crops, what are the next stages, right? In terms of mapping the farm, in terms of precision spraying, of of pesticides, counting crops, counting pest presence, all, everything that services that operational efficiency, but increases that plant health, yield, quality for consumers like ourselves, right? Who are very picky about, the quality of our fruits that we find in grocery stores.
Right. So this vehicle, I didn't know before, but you just mentioned grapes, and I can see lots. All of a sudden, I see lots of grapes in the video now. But you specialized. I get the understanding that you're specializing in grapes and vineyard. Are they called vineyards? Grape fields or whatever they're called? Are they called vineyards or what?
Yeah, you can call
Okay.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, so so it's specializing in grapes. Why is that? Why not something else? I don't know what else, like apples or pears or whatever. I mean, why grapes?
Yeah, it's a really excellent question. We chewed on this question for quite a while. First is, what crops do we want to go after? And within agriculture, what's really interesting is that, you've seen mechanization for quite a long time, right? I mean, in 1892, we had the first tractor, right? And so you've seen mechanization really play a huge role in these like large row crops with combines, big machines like that. Where you don't find mechanization and automation is within specialty crops. And so the reason for this is because specialty crops are really, really delicate. Think about the berries you eat at a grocery store, or the grapes, right? If they aren't quite perfect, you're not going to eat them. And so it takes that really hand-picked, delicate touch to really work. What that means is that the costs of production are actually really quite high. They're 3 times higher, the production costs higher than they are with other crops. And so getting to this point of why table grapes within the specialty crop market, for us, it was really actually quite simple. We saw a lot of focus on strawberries. Everyone loves to talk about strawberries in ag. And we're like, what are these sort of under-touched markets? And we looked in our own backyard. We're based in California. 99% of our over 1 million grapes is harvested in California. So we're like, let's just look in our backyard. There's a huge market here, just in the state of California. And then of course, if you look globally, so let us start with table grapes.
Right. And what does the robot do or offer to do that is currently being done? I mean, what's currently the practice in this scenario? So I can see the robot is being loaded with grapes and it's driving itself to wherever it needs to grow. Normally what would happen, I suppose, is somebody would either drive a vehicle or push a wheelbarrow like this from I can't imagine if it's like a really big field, somebody walking with a wheelbarrow back to the processing center or whatever it is. Describe the process that, without your robot. What's the typical scenario that you find yourself in trying to sell the robot, perhaps?
Yeah, Abdul, and you're spot on. So the majority of time, farm workers, right, spend 30% of their time on the farm transporting via wheelbarrow. So you see it in bits and pieces of this video, just walking back and forth along the rows across the farm. Here you see an example of it, just manually via wheelbarrow. And so what we're trying to do, right, is provide a harvesting sidekick, right, for this piece of the product with the carry, where the carry can autonomously, right, meet the farm worker, as you're seeing here, where it is. The farm worker would load it up with crops, and then the carry would autonomously go back to the sorting station, and you repeat the cycle from there.
Mm. Yeah, I can see it's a very simple proposition, and as long as it's affordable by the vineyard, I'm sure you'll be successful. What are the developments thereafter? I mean, you mentioned strawberries. I've seen a machine, I can't remember the company, but it's developed a machine that supposedly can actually pick the strawberry, which is a very, as you said, a very delicate process, needs to be done by hand. I mean, a lot of these, I can't remember what you call them, these kind of fruits, specialty crops. Yeah, so they need to be, that's probably several stages beyond or different from what you're doing, actually picking things. I don't know if you're planning to do that kind of thing, but it'd be interesting to get your thoughts about what kind of technological advances would be needed for that to be happening. I can see also see a Universal Robots robotic arm in one of the clips, in one of the shots there, which seems to have been picking a fruit from the tree, the crop from the plant or whatever. Yeah, talk about the actual development, how you see the machine developing. Is it going to go into picking, and what do you think of the complexity in terms of technical robotic, requirements of picking? What do you think needs to be done?
Yeah. So yeah, it's a great question. Picking is absolutely on our roadmap. The reality and truth is today, no one has been able to create a picker for table grapes. Maybe a little bit in the R&D stage, we perhaps will see at universities, but even there, you really haven't seen a lot of progress. So what we wanted to sort of unpack and tackle was, what is a good first starting step that is both pragmatic, something that we can tackle right now and we can commercialize right now and build to picking. So as you imagine with picking, right, you need these really grippers, right, that won't just destroy the grapes. I just saw the image of the grapes there. So you can just imagine in your mind. So yeah, we see a little bit of progress, with apples and strawberries, but haven't quite gotten there with table grapes. So for us, when we think of the stage-wise approach, right, it's let's figure out crop transport first. Let's figure out what valuable data can we collect? For example, crop counting, the crop weight, which is actually really important even at this first stage. Secondarily, what add-ons can we add to this ground roving robot that's traveling around the farm? Fertilizer application is, and pesticide application is a reality on farms. So if we can do that in a precise way, which is why we use the term precision agriculture, right? It's better for our land and our environment in the long term. And so that's something we're looking at. We look at pest presence, right? And counting that. And all of these variables around, soil quality, things like that, are things that we think we can measure through various types of tools. With crop picking, being that holy grail that we do feel confident we'll be able to get to over time.
Yeah, I just remembered that I saw something here called what you call your plan. So 21, 22, the transportation vehicle, which you're talking about, and it's aimed at grapes or vineyards. Then next year, you're looking at precision spraying, crop count and pest control perhaps. And then after that, crop picking and ripeness. That's the one that intrigues a lot of people because it's the most challenging. You know what brainy people are like. They like to dwell on the most complex problems and spend ages dwelling on it. But yeah, same here, same for me, although I can't really say I have no technical, abilities, but it occurs to me that you need two arms and two eyes. It only recently occurred to me that a lot of the machine vision, robotic vision companies, they offer cameras with a single lens, single camera. And, a two-eyed sort of machine system is available. It's fairly new. I don't want to mention their name, but there are lots of cameras out there. But the idea of having two eyes obviously allows you to have depth perception and all sorts of other things that benefits from it. And I don't know why all cameras, robotic cameras, are not too wide, and the there are dual armed robots, but they're few and far between. There's only about 2 or 3 of them, I think. Different companies make them. But it seems to me that, that's what you require, because if you look at the human, if you're mimicking that, you know, you need one hand to hold the grapes or the stem or whatever you call it, and another hand to cut the, you know, stem from the tree. Now, there's also something called soft robotics, the grippers that are very soft and can handle things very gently without crushing them and whatever. So there's a lot of, I feel that there's enough technologies or components out there to build a solution for the crop picking. But obviously, I'm not, you know, I'm a roboticist like you. But what do you think? I mean, do you think you're being a bit too ambitious, thinking that you might be able to do the crop picking by 2023 or 24? And I don't know. There's probably one or two other companies that have done it, but I don't know the details of their system actually, what they use, what kind of components they use.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's definitely bold, you know, and ambitious. The reason why we have some confidence there is, I mentioned Wavemaker Labs. We're coming out of a robotics and automation studio, and so there's companies there who are building collaborative kitchen robots, that are building, you know, burger flipping robots that have these robotic arms, that have the gripper. So, you know, there's a lot that we are applying and learning, you know, every single day from those adjacent companies. And so the pace of our technological development, just by the nature, right, of being around an ecosystem of creators and innovators and engineers every single day, means that we can accelerate development. On top of that, you know, as someone who believes in lifting up the industry as a whole, you know, agriculture cannot progress without the support of, you know, our researchers and our academics, and as well as those in government. And so for us, strengthening that triangle and making sure that we are part of collaborative networks that are constantly trying to foster these really incredible discussions, not only on tech innovation, but right on people, right, and our land and environment. So for us, just constantly, you know, pushing on all those angles. So yeah, so that gives us more confidence that we can hit those goals.
Yeah, I think also I'd just want to quickly ask you whether it's more of a software challenge rather than a hardware challenge, because you know what the hardware needs to do. I mean, if you have a two-armed robot, you need a soft gripper, and the other arm needs to have a cutting device of some kind at the end. And integrating those two things, and integrating that with a mobile platform like the Carry that you've got, is it more of a software challenge than a hardware challenge, or is it equally difficult to build this, you know, this device that we can imagine happening in the next couple of years?
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I think you're one of the few people who picked up on that. So yeah, the software challenge, even today, is a deeper challenge than the hardware challenge, right? So I know you're speaking about picking, but just to bring it back to the Carry today and just the transport. For us, right, how are we planning, path planning, right? Are we using GPS localization? How are we planning scheduling? So we expect every farm, right, to not just have one of the carries. So how do you constantly schedule so that, you know, the moment one carry is loaded with crops, it can go back while another carry is coming towards another farm worker ready to be loaded. So that sort of scheduling piece, it's almost like a logistics management type of challenge. So those are the things that we're working through right now, right? And then of course the data analytics, what information is the most useful to the farms now. What we understand is even being able to understand what the crop weight is, that's information that they don't have right now. So just having that off the bat. And so this software is just going to get, as you can imagine, more precise and smarter, over time as we really get to understand each little nook and cranny of the farm and the farmland.
Let's talk about the actual return on investment and how you sell this kind of device to farmers or vineyard owners. Now, a lot of them will be a lot more open to automation, not just because automation has been talked about in the last few years more than probably at any other time, but also because coronavirus has probably affected farmers more than other people. I'm not sure, but and generally there's always talk about, especially where in your part of the world you're talking about, a lot of people talk about immigration, immigrant communities or people that come over and do the fruit picking. The same here in the UK as well. There are, it's a thorny, like tricky political issue. But yeah, I imagine farmers would be more willing to think about this kind of thing. What kind of financial, what persuades them? What do you think persuades them? I would have thought it'd be the financial reasons rather than social reasons. They're business people at the end of the day. So what kind of return on investment and benefits and productivity gains do you think they'll get from, say, a typical, I don't know if there is a typical size farm or anything like that, a vineyard or anything like that, but yeah, what kind of research have you done? What kind of discoveries have you made? How can you sell it to people, I suppose, to the farmers?
Yeah, it's a good question. So for the farms that we've talked with, overwhelmingly, right, for them, the challenges, the pressures on their farms, right, have been declining revenue, increasing production costs with the cost of people and labor scarcity being a huge challenge with the aging workforce, things of that nature. And so for us, what we're saying is that, we can increase that production efficiency, right? So if that farm worker, that 30% of time that they're usually spent just, taking a wheelbarrow and transporting a crop, they could pick more boxes. And so the production efficiency increases by up to 30%. And we're looking at payback periods of actually only 80 days with just one carry. So you can imagine what can happen with 4 or 5 carries. In addition to that, and farms have said this as well, right? Farm worker safety is a challenge, right? Not only because of the human side, right? And I'm a humanist as well as a technologist. So I do like talking about the human factor, especially when we talk about robotics. But it is also, just if you want to speak pure business, right? It's a cost, right? When your people, are getting hurt, can't show up, right? Have to tend to their wounds, so to speak. So that is a big driving factor, right? And being able to increase efficiency on the farm, right, with this tool is a huge piece of it, as well as increasing farm worker safety.
If you don't mind me broadening out, just to talk about other countries, I know you talked about, you saying your backyard, and obviously California is huge, as you explained, both in terms of landmass and economic things. But there's all sorts of other countries that have agriculture, huge agricultural sectors, India and so on. There's so many people working on farms, and your machines seems fairly priced at a point which it might be viable for those kind of farms as well. So I don't want to talk about top politics too much. I mean, that would probably mean that there'd be a lot less people eventually over a few years. Fewer and fewer people will be working on farms. I mean, in the West, Europe and North America, or US probably, there's probably far fewer people working on farms and vineyards, I suppose is your area. But yeah, what do you think of the potential job losses, if you like, of caused by robotics in general? Let's be fair to you in agriculture.
Yeah. I mean, this is something I'm fascinated by. There is a really amazing academic out of UC Davis, Philip Martin, who published a book called The Prosperity Paradox. And really what that and it's really all about sort of automation and labor and farming. And what he found, right, as countries get richer, the share of the population who are engaged in farming decreases, right? And so there's this correlation kind of effect, and that share of the labor then starts moving into types of work that are more, specialized or have health insurance, for example, right? So those are the things that our parents, your parents, like us as parents, right, would want for our kids. And so you see that shift. And so I think, this I think it's a really important question. For us, we're a harvesting sidekick, right? It's a collaborative robot. We're not really thinking about, taking jobs away or anything of that nature. But in terms of Ag 4.0, that vision of the future where a lot of things are automated, right? I think what we're going to see, and a lot of people talk about this, right, is can we see like a shift in the types of work that people do? These farmers in Ventura don't want their kids to do this type of work. So is it things like quality control, right? Is it more creative economy type of work? And so that's the stuff that I think I get excited by, having worked in India, right? Having worked in West Africa. So, countries which you have kind of have mentioned, we can diversify sort of the types of work that are done. And we've seen that for centuries, right? That possibility is there.
Mm. Yeah, you mentioned you've traveled even to Bangladesh and where I'm from, and spent a few years of my childhood on a farm where everything was done manually, even to the point where they take the skin off the rice using manual techniques, sort of a stick with a metal thing attached to the end of it. The rice mill, there was a rice mill somewhere a few miles away, but back in those days, they didn't used to use them. I don't know what's happening now. I haven't visited for a long time. It is very, very difficult work, as you can imagine. So I imagine on the one hand, you people would be quite happy to implement automation technologies. And on the other, it means that farm laborers would have to find other jobs. So it is a very interesting area, but it's surely, on balance, you have to think, I think of it as progress. Obviously, they can find other jobs. I'm sure there'll be something else to do. I don't know, maybe I'm being callous, but yeah, it is a very interesting area. But yeah, what were you doing before? And the Future Acres project or businesses seems fairly new. So, what were your interests or projects before?
Yeah. So I've spent about the past 15 years dedicated to, ag tech and the clean tech sectors, and really in the role as a mission-driven entrepreneur. So I'm a big believer, right, and sort of that power of innovation and tech to drive and real change and move the needle. So I actually started my career as a Peace Corps volunteer in West Africa. So really was understanding, these developing economies. And then after that, moved to India for a couple of years, worked in microfinance with micro enterprises, and agriculture being a huge part of that. And then when I returned to the States, right, where I was born and raised, I focused very much on the tech sector, right? So how can technology play a role, right, in advancing both our renewable energy goals, our clean tech goals, but also our agricultural goals. So agricultural waste to energy, utility scale renewable energy projects, indoor farming were some of the companies I've built in the past.
Yeah, indoor farming is another huge area, which maybe we can talk about next time. Indoor farming, I don't know if you mean vertical farming, but we get a lot of readers for our vertical farming articles because I guess it involves a lot of automation technologies, whether you're talking about lighting and watering and I don't know other things. But yeah, it's a huge area, and because it can be they can be located in urban spaces inside a building. It basically brings the farm closer to the consumers. So it's a really interesting area. It'd be interesting to talk to you about it. But I feel like I've asked you a lot of questions already, and but if there's anything else you want to add, please feel free to do so. I may have missed something in my questioning.
Yeah, I think maybe just 2 points because you did mention indoor farming. So, right, it was my past industry. I think has fantastic potential, and I think the narrative is very strong in ag tech about indoor farming today because it is the first time from a price point perspective that we can see more commercialization. But the one point that I'd love to drive home for everyone out there is that outdoor farms will continue to drive the majority of food production. So we need all the solutions like to come to the table, both outdoor farming and indoor farming to really work together to drive production efficiencies, right? Tackle environmental challenge, things of that nature. And that's really what I'm passionate about, rising tide lifts all boats type of thing. Yeah, and if I may, just to plug the campaign again, for those interested, right, we do have that $3 million equity crowdfunding campaign on Seed Invest. You can find information on our website. We launched it just a few weeks ago, Abdul, and it's been going incredibly well. Just in a few weeks, I think we've hit over $650,000 in reservations, which is pretty astounding and gives me a lot of confidence in the people listening today who really care about ag and ag solutions in our society.
Yeah, I think, is this the correct Seed Invest website that you're seeing on the screen?
Yeah, Seed Invest, and then you could search for Future Acres here. Yeah, this is the right Seed Invest website.
Yeah, I don't know if I can search without logging in or signing up. Not sure, but they can also go through to your website, I guess. Here, what is if you don't mind me asking, what does a $1,000 investment get me if I was to invest?
I will have to get back to you on that because I don't remember the actual conversion in terms of shares. It is. We do have a Seed Invest comment board as well, so you can just ask a really direct question like that, and then we can answer because it's all in our filing as well. So all that paperwork, SEC filing, for example, it has a lot of that information.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much for your time and your insights. Best of luck with the fundraising, and do let us know how it's going. And once you meet your target, which I'm sure you will, we'll maybe talk again, or at least do an article about you. And we'd love to hear about your progress.
Thank you, Abdul. Really enjoyed being on here.
Send us an email at sales@roboticsandautomationnews.com to register for one of our many upcoming webinars. And if you'd like us to host your webinar, we have a range of options, including long-term lead generation packages and marketing campaigns. We look forward to hearing from you soon.